Echoes of the Lantern Lake. The mist rose slowly over Lantern Lake that morning, curling in soft ribbons across the still surface like secrets reluctant to be told. It was the kind of quiet only small towns seemed to hold, the kind that made you feel as if the whole world was waiting for something to happen. For Claire Whitmore, that something had always been a mystery she couldn't quite name. She'd left the city behind 3 months ago, leaving her publishing job, her noise, and her carefully organized life in favor of a ramshackle lakeside cottage that had been her grandmother's. At first, she thought she had come for solitude. But lately, solitude had begun whispering back. Every dawn she would walk the wooden path along the lake, coffee mug warming her hands, notebook tucked beneath her arm, and always she'd find a single lantern, unlit but freshly placed, bobbing gently near her dock. She had asked the neighbors, the postman, even the elderly couple who ran the local bakery if they knew who left it, but no one did. Each time she thought about it, her heart fluttered in that strange space between unease and curiosity. It wasn't fear she felt. It was recognition, as though someone out there knew her better than she knew herself. The town of Eldon's Hollow wasn't large, but it was beautiful in a way that demanded quiet admiration. Maple trees flamed red and gold around the lake, and the air always smelled faintly of pine and wet earth. The locals had stories about the lake's name, about the old estate on the far shore, about ghosts and forgotten love letters. But Claire had never believed in such things, until the night she found the first note. It had been folded carefully inside the lantern's glass, its corners softened by dew. The handwriting was elegant, almost too deliberate, as if written by someone who thought deeply before every word. To the one who watches the dawn, you remind me of what the world forgot. That was all it said. Claire reread the sentence a dozen times that night, feeling something stir. Not dread, but a pull, as though those words belonged to a conversation she had unknowingly started years ago. The next morning she wrote a reply, half joking, half curious, and sealed it in the lantern's glass before pushing it back out over the water. Then perhaps you should remind the world yourself, she wrote. She thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. For nearly a week, there was nothing. Then one foggy morning, the lantern returned with a new note. I am not certain I still know how, it read. The handwriting trembled slightly this time. The ink faded at the edges. And beneath the words, a faint scent of lilac, the same perfume her grandmother had worn. That detail unsettled Claire more than she cared to admit. She spent her days pretending not to think about it, taking walks to the town square, sketching the lakeside trees, buying cinnamon rolls she didn't need from Mrs. Anders at the bakery. But each evening her gaze would drift toward the darkening water, waiting for the glimmer of glass to appear. It was ridiculous, she told herself. She was 32 years old, educated, pragmatic. She did not believe in ghostly pen pals or mysterious strangers who spoke in riddles. And yet, every night her heart leapt at the smallest ripple. One evening, as twilight bled into the horizon, she finally saw him, a figure on the opposite shore, standing beneath a crooked willow tree. He was tall, wrapped in a dark coat, his posture still as a statue. Even at that distance, Claire felt as though his eyes were fixed on her. She raised her hand instinctively, and for the briefest moment, he mirrored the gesture. Then the fog swallowed him whole. From that night on, the notes became longer, small glimpses into a mind both tender and wounded. I once lived by this lake, one began. I built the lanterns for someone I loved, but she left before I could light the last one. Another read, the water remembers everything, even promises broken under moonlight. Each message carried a melancholy beauty that felt both intimate and impossible. And though she told herself she was only indulging curiosity, Claire found herself writing back. telling him about her grandmother's cottage, about leaving behind the city, about the ache of wanting to belong somewhere. She never asked his name. Felt sacred not to. Days turned colder. The trees shed their leaves, and frost began to lace the grass each morning. One afternoon, while visiting the town library, Claire stumbled upon an old newspaper article pinned beneath glass in the history section. Tragic fire at Whitmore Estate, local artisan presumed dead. The date was 50 years ago. Her breath caught as she read the name. Samuel Harland. The photograph beside it showed a man standing beside a half-built lantern. His smile faint but familiar. She couldn't explain how she knew, but the eyes were the same ones she had seen across the lake. That night she could barely sleep. The air felt heavy with unspoken words. When she woke before dawn, a thin layer of mist hugged the ground like breath on glass. The lantern floated near her dock again, but this time, instead of a note, it carried something small. A ring, simple and tarnished with age. Inside the band, engraved so faintly she could barely see it, were the words, "For the promise of tomorrow." Her heart pounded. Without hesitation, she wrote her own note and sealed it with trembling fingers. "If you still remember tomorrow, meet me when the first snow falls." She left it drifting on the water and waited. The days that followed passed in a blur of gray skies and restless thoughts. Sometimes she caught herself smiling at nothing. Sometimes she stood by the window long after dark, whispering words she couldn't bring herself to write. When the first snow finally arrived, soft and silent, as though the world exhaled, she lit a lantern of her own and walked to the lake's edge. The light flickered against the glass, her reflection shimmering beside it. For a moment nothing happened. Then, across the frozen water, another light flickered in response. She crossed the narrow wooden bridge, her boots crunching against snow, breath clouding the air. The figure was waiting beneath the same willow tree, his coat dusted with frost. As she approached, her pulse drummed in her ears. He looked young, far too young to belong to any newspaper 50 years old. Yet there was something timeless in his face, something both fragile and eternal. His eyes held a softness that made her knees weaken. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said. His voice was low, melodic, like distant rain. "Most don't believe long enough." "I'm not sure I do," she replied honestly. "But I couldn't stop thinking about you." He smiled faintly, a shadow of sadness behind it. "Then you already remember what it means to hope." They talked until dawn. He told her of a life spent crafting lanterns meant to guide lost travelers across the lake, and of the woman he loved, her grandmother, Lillian Whitmore. The realization hit Claire like thunder. "She used to tell me stories," Claire whispered, "about a man who promised to bring her light even after the world went dark." Samuel nodded, his expression distant. "She left before I could keep that promise," he said softly. "But when you came, I thought perhaps the world was giving me one more chance." The first rays of sun spilled over the horizon, gilding the snow in gold. Samuel's outline shimmered faintly, as though sunlight could not quite hold him. Claire reached out, desperate, but her fingers met only warmth and air. "Don't go," she pleaded. He took her hand gently, and though she could see through him, she felt the faintest pressure, the whisper of touch. "Every lantern is a wish made visible," he said. "And you, Claire, are mine." She wanted to ask him to stay, to anchor himself to her world, but even as she spoke his name, the morning wind carried him away. Only the lantern remained, glowing softly beside her. Winter deepened. The lake froze over completely, turning to glass that mirrored the sky. Claire stayed, though part of her wondered if she had imagined everything. But each night she saw the lantern light flickering across the ice. Not drifting now, but shining steady, like a heartbeat that refused to fade. And when spring came, when the first thaw sent ripples dancing again, she found new notes in her mailbox. Modern handwriting this time, from a man named Sam Harlan Jr., who had recently moved to town to restore his grandfather's old workshop. He introduced himself one afternoon at the bakery. Kind eyes, gentle hands, the faintest scent of lilac on his coat. "You're Claire, right?" he asked, shy but certain. "I think my grandfather once knew your family." Her smile was quiet, but her heart already knew. "I think he did," she said. They talked for hours, and when they left the bakery together, the sunlight glinted off the lake like 1,000 tiny lanterns, each carrying a promise across time. That night, as she stood on her dock, the water calm beneath the moon, Claire whispered a single word to the wind: "Thank you." A faint glow answered from beneath the surface, and for the briefest instant, she thought she saw Samuel's reflection smiling back before fading into ripples of light. From then on, Lantern Lake was never dark again. The townspeople often wondered who kept lighting the lanterns every night, their soft golden glow dancing across the water. But Claire never told them. Some mysteries, she realized, were not meant to be solved. They were meant to be loved.